She thought it was just another day polishing silence. For 6 months, Serafina Moro had walked the echoing corridors of the Palladino estate, a mansion so quiet it felt like time itself had stopped breathing inside it. But that morning, the silence sounded different, heavier, watching, as though the very walls sensed what she did not yet know, that before the sun would set, something sacred would begin to unfold. She thought it was another day cleaning the mansion until she reached the 3rd floor. Stay with me right to the end, because this story will break your heart and heal it at the same time. Before we dive in, take a quick second to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment below where in the world you're watching from. Up there, where the world seemed to hold its breath, lay Aurelius Thorne, the kind of name whispered in boardrooms with fear, the kind of man written about in magazines as legend, but seen by no one, a ruler of empires once feared by presidents and kings, and now a dying soul held prisoner by failing breath. The afternoon light broke across his silver hair like a farewell. He was always composed, always unreadable, but not today. Today, there was fire in his eyes, not life, but urgency. Serafina paused in the doorway. Something in her spirit told her not to speak, not even to ask if he was in pain, because what she saw in his eyes was not the panic of a man terrified of death, but the desperation of a man terrified of running out of time. For the first time ever, she felt the air in that mansion tremble. This was no longer the cold palace she entered 6 months ago, unchanged and untouched by warmth, but a place waiting to witness something that should have happened long before now. Aurelius's hand trembled, not from weakness, but from intent, as if held back by years of restraint finally cracking. His gaze, sharp yet unbearably fragile, locked onto Serafina not as servant to master, but as messenger to destiny. And in that moment, she understood, he was not fighting to stay alive. He was fighting to speak before life let him go. One last wish, one final truth, one message the world was never meant to find out. And Serafina Moro was the only one in the world he had chosen to hear it. She stepped closer, heartbeat silent, knowing nothing about her life will remain the same after this moment. What she did not know is that her own bloodline was about to answer. Serafina felt it before she fully understood it. The shift, the way Aurelius Thorne no longer looked at her as staff, but as if searching her face for a ghost that did not belong to this time. His eyes, once cold as boardrooms and unreadable contracts, now trembled with memory, the kind that doesn't ask permission before haunting a man. She dipped the cloth in warm water and gently laid it across his frail hands. That was when she heard it, a name, whispered like a forbidden prayer. Marceline. The sound of it was fragile, like a word formed from broken glass, and longing. He didn't speak it the way one recalls a person. He spoke the way a drowning man might reach for air. Serafina hesitated, not out of confusion, but reverence. Instinct told her not to ask, not to break whatever door had just opened inside his mind. The mansion held its breath around them, as if it too had been waiting decades for that name to resurface. Aurelius's eyes were no longer seeing the room before him. They were traveling, somewhere far from marble floors and dying heartbeats. His voice, barely alive a moment ago, found strength, not in the present, but in memory. He spoke of Maryland, of flickering fireflies that floated like captured stars across late July air, of borrowed summers, where time felt infinite before ambition sank its teeth into his fate, and of a girl, not described with mere beauty, but with reverence, the sort of girl whose laughter didn't just echo, it silenced the storms inside him. Serafina listened transfixed, the way a soul listens when it senses history, not being recalled but resurrected. Aurelius paused, and when he whispered again, softer, almost broken, it was not her name he was calling. It was home. Marceline, I was coming back. His eyes glossed, not with defeat, but with youth. Youth no one living had ever seen in him. Serafina stood still, pulse silent, unaware that the past he was confessing was not just his, but hers. She did not yet know that the woman he was remembering was her own grandmother. Aurelius Thorne had never asked her to sit before. Not in 6 months. Not once. Servants stand. Assistants wait. But this was different. His eyes did not command her as a master. They invited her, as if he were unworthy of a witness unless she willingly chose to remain. Sit, he whispered, not in authority but in surrender. Serafina did. For the first time in that mansion, she was not Serafina, the maid. She was Serafina, the only person allowed to hear what no one else ever would. Aurelius's voice was barely stronger than breath. But the moment he began to speak, it wasn't a dying man she heard. It was a man haunted by a promise. He spoke of a time before the world knew his name, before empires, before Forbes lists, before a single drop of greed existed in his bloodstream, a time when love was still bigger than ambition. He described a weeping willow in Maryland, its branches bowing like a secret guardian, a summer so warm, laughter tasted like honey in the air, and beneath that willow, a girl, Marceline Dupré. He said her name like a vow that never expired. She wasn't a lover he had forgotten. She was a future he abandoned, a life he was supposed to live, until power pulled him away like a storm no man could resist. He had promised her he would return. He never did, and the world applauded him for everything he built, never knowing he loathed every brick of it, because every skyscraper, every empire, every signature on every contract was written as an apology to the woman he never went back for. Serafina's breath fractured in her lungs. Marceline Dupré, her grandmother, the blood in her veins turned to ice. She didn't speak. She couldn't. But Aurelius felt it, felt the knowledge ignite inside her, felt the past and present finally find each other in the same silent air. And for the first time in decades, the pain in his chest loosened, as if at last he had inhaled forgiveness. Aurelius Thorne looked nothing like a dying man in that moment. Not defeated, not fading, but terrifyingly aware, not of death, but of what might die with him if she walked away now. His voice, though weak, no longer trembled from illness, but from regret sharpened into urgency. "There is one thing," he whispered, eyes locked on Serafina, "that all of this, a faint gesture to the empire beyond the glass windows, could never buy back. It wasn't money. It wasn't legacy. It was truth, not a truth for newspapers, not for heirs, not for history. A truth meant only for one woman, Marceline Dupré." He confessed, not with pride, but with reverence, that he had never replaced her, not even once, that every woman he met after her was merely someone he could not love the way he loved her. She had not been forgotten, only grieved, quietly, lifelong. "If I die before I can speak it to her myself," his breath hitched, not from sickness, but restrained fear, "then you must carry it. You must tell her. She was never abandoned in my heart." He didn't ask. He pleaded, without dignity, without image, without the arm of the world once bowed to. In that instant, Serafina was no longer just a caretaker. She was inheritance, not a fortune, but a final love. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had come here for wages, for work. Not this, not destiny, not history's unfinished vow being placed at her feet. But when she looked back at Aurelius, she did not see a billionaire. She saw a man on the edge of eternity, begging not to vanish with his truth still shackled inside him. She did not speak her answer. She simply held his gaze. And he understood. His entire body softened, as if at last the war inside him had ended. And then Aurelius Thorne, the man the world called unbreakable, began to weep. Morning light filtered to the towering arched windows of the Palladino estate, but it did nothing to soften the tension that arrived with it. Selim and Isolde Thorne, heirs to an empire they did not build, only inherited, stepped to the marble halls with the composure of royalty and the impatience of executives who believed time should obey them. Every movement was precise, elegant, unreadable. They had been born into legacy, not love, sculpted more by expectation than warmth. They barely acknowledged Serafina as she opened the door to their father's chamber. To them, she was a presence that did not matter, a uniform, a background, the kind of face their world had trained them not to see. But Aurelius Thorne, frail yet fiercely awake, did not look at them when they entered. He looked at her. Selim and Isolde exchanged the smallest glance. Confusion, then discomfort. It was subtle, but it cracked their poise for a fraction of a second. They approached their father with rehearsed composure, all business cloaked as concern. Their questions were about succession, trusts, control, board stability. They spoke as though his death were an inevitable transition, not the unraveling of a man's unfinished heart. Aurelius listened, but not once did his gaze fall upon the gold-plated future they were preparing to dissect. It never left Serafina. Selim paused mid-sentence. Isolde followed his line of sight. They looked back at the maid, and for the first time really saw her, an unfamiliar awareness flickering across their faces. It unsettled them. They had seen their father bow to no one. So why did his eyes now hold reverence instead of authority, and not for them? "Father," Selim said carefully, "there are key decisions we must finalize now." Aurelius turned to them, and with a clarity that cut through every strategy they had come prepared for, he simply said, "Leave us." Stunned silence. No explanation. No negotiation. Just dismissal. His tone was not cruel, but unmovable. The heirs, who could command empires with a single signature, were rendered children once more, unchosen, unneeded in a moment that clearly mattered more than $1 billion empire. Frustration flickered beneath their elegance, but they obeyed. The door closed, and Aurelius did not watch them go. He looked only at Serafina Moro, the one person in the world he trusted with his soul, not his empire. Night did not simply fall. It settled over the Palladino estate like the final closing of a great book. The air was unnaturally still, reverent, as if even time knew it was not permitted to interrupt what was about to end. Aurelius Thorne lay beneath the soft glow of a single lamp, not as a king in power, but as a man whose last pages had arrived. His once formidable presence was nearly translucent now, a flicker more than a flame. Yet his eyes, when they opened, searched for only one name. Serafina. Her feet moved before thought. Instinct. Fate. Something deeper than duty. She entered his room not as a maid answering a summons, but as the final witness to a story that was never given a chance to belong to history. Aurelius did not ask her to remember him. He asked her to deliver him. Not for me. His voice was sand and wind, barely sound. For her, Marceline, every breath was a climb now, every word an unburied vow. That she may know, he paused, not from weakness, but from aching reverence. She was never forgotten, not for a day, not for a moment. He was not asking to be glorified. He was asking to set her free. From the silence he sentenced her by leaving. His hand trembled. Serafina took it, not as servant to master, but as one bloodline, accepting the unfinished love of another. And in that sacred exchange, there was no wealth left, no empire, no legacy. Only the single truth he had fought death to speak. Love was not lost, only delayed. Aurelius's chest rose one last time, and as the breath left him, slow, unresisted, almost grateful, the man the world called immortal finally let go. And with that, the empire stopped breathing. Dawn arrives without warmth. The Palladino estate, once intimidating in its grandeur, now feels hollow, stripped of its power and pulse. Curtains remain drawn. Every hallway walks quieter than before. News travels fast, but grief moves slower, heavy, uncertain, echoing like footsteps that no longer know where to lead. Aurelius Thorne is gone. Selim and Isolde stand in the grand hall where condolences will eventually flow. Yet they are still, frozen, elegant but unanchored. Their expressions are not loud with sorrow, but stunned with realization. It was never the empire that truly held their father. It was someone else entirely, and they had never known. They expect the state directives, funeral arrangements, strategy, order, the language they were raised to interpret love through. Instead, Serafina Moro approaches. She is composed, not fragile with grief, not waiting for permission. She does not bow. She does not hesitate. She speaks. "I'm leaving." Both heirs look at her, as if she has spoken in a language they were never taught. She continues, steady, unshaken, to Maryland. Their silence fractures, not with protest, but confusion. Not for her own sake, she adds. For Marceline Dupré, a name they have never heard, and yet one that instantly rearranges a narrative of their father's life. She tells them their father's final wish was not to be remembered, but to be delivered, not to legacy, but to love, to the woman he never stopped holding in the quietest chambers of his soul, his forever Marceline, not forgotten for even a single day. Selim's jaw loosens, control fading. Isolde's breath catches, as if she suddenly understands she never truly knew her father at all. They do not stop Serafina. They do not even speak, because this is not a maid leaving. This is a promise being carried across time. Serafina turns, not toward the staff quarters, not toward service, but toward destiny, leaving the mansion not as a servant, but as a final author of a love that death could not erase. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.